When Manhattan investment banker Robert Sullivan callously threw his pregnant wife Sarah out of their luxury penthouse for his seductive young secretary, he believed he'd finally secured the sophisticated life he'd always craved. 24 years later, fate would orchestrate their reunion in the most shocking way imaginable. But could a mother's fierce determination and unwavering love prove stronger than decades of betrayal, abandonment, and crushing heartbreak? Ever been discarded like trash by someone you loved? Now this one's for you. Like, if you believe people get what they deserve, subscribe for more stories and tell me your state below. Get comfortable, grab some tissues, and prepare yourself for a story that proves sometimes the universe has a way of making everything right in the end. Sarah Mitchell carefully smoothed out the delicate baby clothes spread across their king-sized bed, her face glowing with the kind of happiness that only expectant mothers truly understand. The nursery down the hall was finally taking shape. Soft cream walls, adorned with hand-painted stars, an antique rocking chair her grandmother had given her, and tiny outfits that made her heart skip a beat every time she imagined their son wearing them. The sound of Robert's key turning in the lock of their elegant Upper East Side apartment made her smile grow even wider. She couldn't wait to show him the adorable little sweater she'd found at the boutique around the corner, navy blue with tiny anchors. Perfect for their future sailor. But when Robert stepped through the doorway, the expression on his face was unlike anything she'd ever seen before. Cold, calculating, distant. The kind of look that made her blood run cold, and her stomach clench with a dread that had nothing to do with her pregnancy.
"Sarah, we need to talk. I want a divorce."
The words sliced through the comfortable warmth of their home like a blade through silk. The precious little sweater slipped from her suddenly numb fingers and fluttered to the polished hardwood floor. "Robert, what are you saying? This doesn't make any sense." Her voice came out as barely a whisper, her mind desperately trying to process what she was hearing. "We're having a baby in 3 months. We planned this. We wanted this. I've met someone else. Someone who can actually contribute to my career advancement. Someone who moves in the right social circles and understands the sophisticated lifestyle I'm building." His tone was businesslike, detached, as if he were discussing a merger rather than destroying their marriage and family. "I need you packed and out of here tonight." Sarah felt the entire world shift beneath her feet. She instinctively placed both hands on her rounded belly, feeling their son respond with a strong kick, as if he could sense the catastrophe unfolding around them. "Robert, please, this is insane. I'm carrying your child. We took vows. We promised to love each other through everything. The child will have far better opportunities without being limited by your background." Robert couldn't even meet her. Desperate, pleading eyes. "Rebecca, she's my executive assistant. She's Harvard educated. From a prominent Connecticut family, connected to everyone who matters on Wall Street. She can give me the kind of sophisticated children who will actually make something significant of themselves." The sheer cruelty and coldness of his words hit Sarah like a physical assault. She dropped to her knees on their expensive imported rug, clutching at his perfectly creased designer trousers with trembling hands. "Please, Robert, I'm begging you. For our baby's sake, for everything we've built together, I can change. I can learn. I can become whatever you need me to be. Just don't throw us away. Pack whatever you can carry. I want you gone in 1 hour." His voice was final, emotionless, like a judge pronouncing a death sentence. How had their love story turned into this nightmare? The question tormented Sarah as she stared up at the man she'd given her heart to so completely. Just 7 years earlier, Robert had been a struggling junior analyst at a modest investment firm in Queens. Working 16-hour days and barely scraping together rent for his tiny studio apartment, she could still picture him so clearly young. Hungry, determined, eating the same turkey sandwich for lunch every single day at Murphy's Family Diner in Astoria,
where Sarah worked double shifts as a waitress while putting herself through community college at night. He used to sit at the corner
booth by the window, studying financial reports and market analyses with an intensity that both impressed and charmed her. Those early days felt like a beautiful dream now. Robert would wait for her to finish her shift, then walk her home through the quiet, tree-lined streets of their working-class neighborhood. They'd talk for hours about their dreams, their hopes, their plans for a future that seemed bright with possibility. "We're both starting from absolutely nothing, Sarah," he used to say. his eyes bright with ambition and love, as they sat on the steps of her small apartment building. But that's what makes this so exciting. Together, we can build something incredible. Together, we can rise above everything that's tried to hold us back. Sarah had believed in him with her whole heart. She'd believed in his dreams when he was just another ambitious young man in bargain suits from discount stores. She'd worked extra shifts to help pay for his business school applications, celebrated every small promotion with homemade dinners, encouraged him through every setback and rejection. She'd been his biggest cheerleader, his safe harbor, his unwavering source of love and support, and now, for all her sacrifice and devotion. Now that he was a successful investment banker with a corner office overlooking Central Park and a wardrobe, that cost more than most people's annual salary. He was discarding her like a piece of trash that had outlived its usefulness. That brutal February night, with snow beginning to fall and the temperature dropping below freezing, Sarah found herself standing on the sidewalk outside their luxury building with nothing but a small-wheeled suitcase and the winter coat on her back. Every step sent shooting pains through her swollen feet and aching back, and she could feel their son moving restlessly inside her, as if he somehow understood that their safe, warm world had just been shattered forever. She was completely alone. In the world, an orphan who'd aged out of the foster care system at 18, with no family, no safety net, no one to call for help. She walked through the harsh streets of Manhattan for hours, for breath-forming clouds in the frigid air, till exhaustion and desperation finally drove her to seek shelter in an abandoned subway entrance in the Bronx. The concrete floor was brutally cold against her back, and the sounds of the city above seemed to mock her desperation. Sarah cried until her body had no tears left to give, her hands never leaving her belly as she tried to protect her unborn child from the harsh reality of their situation. But as the first pale rays of dawn began to filter down through the subway grates, painting everything in soft shades of gold and hope, something shifted inside Sarah's heart. She placed both hands firmly on her rounded belly and made a sacred promise to the life growing inside her. "I will not let you suffer because of your father's selfish choices," she whispered fiercely into the morning air.
"I will be strong enough for both of us, my precious baby. I will give you everything beautiful and good that this world has to offer, no matter what it takes."
Despite her exhaustion and the constant ache in her back and feet, Sarah began her search for work that very morning. The response was predictably cruel. Door after door slammed in her face the moment potential employers noticed her obvious pregnancy. But just as despair was beginning to overwhelm her and the sun was setting on another fruitless day, fate intervened in the form of Maria Elena Rodriguez. Maria was a woman in her 60s with salt and pepper hair pulled back in a neat bun, kind brown eyes that seemed to see straight into your soul, and hands weathered by decades of honest work. She was selling fresh fruit, homemade empanadas, hot coffee from a small cart outside Penn Station, and when she saw Sarah's pale, exhausted face and the defeat in her shoulders, her maternal instincts immediately took over. "Mia, you look like you're about to collapse right here on this busy sidewalk," Maria said in accented English that was warm with genuine concern. "When did you last have a real meal? You're eating for two, yes?" Sarah's pride battled fiercely with her desperate hunger and need. "I'm looking for work, ma'am." "Any kind of work? I can sell, I can clean, I can do whatever needs to be done. I'm not looking for charity." "Sit down before you fall down, Nina," Maria commanded with gentle authority, guiding Sarah to a nearby bench. She pressed a ripe banana, a warm empanada, and a cup of hot coffee into Sarah's trembling hands. "Food first, then we talk about everything else. A mother needs strength," as Sarah gratefully devoured what felt like the most delicious meal of her life. Maria listened to her heartbreaking story with a mixture of growing fury at Robert's cruelty and increasing admiration for Sarah's fierce determination to survive and protect her child. "You work for me now," Maria declared, without hesitation when Sarah finished speaking. "You take this cart of fruit tomorrow morning. All you sell in the financial district. Those rich people, they pay good money for fresh fruit. Whatever you make after covering my costs, you keep every penny. We help each other, sir. For the next 5 months, Sarah pushed that fruit cart through the unforgiving streets of Manhattan with a determination that amazed even New York's most hardened street vendors. Her belly grew larger with each passing week, making the physical demands of the work increasingly challenging. But she never complained, never gave up, never lost sight of her goal. Maria watched this brave young woman struggle day after day with growing respect and affection. Sarah wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. Building relationships with regular customers, learning the rhythms of the city, proving to herself and everyone around her that she was capable of far more than anyone had ever given her credit for. "Come live with me," Maria offered one particularly cold evening as Sarah was carefully counting the day's earnings with fingers stiff from the winter cold. "My apartment in Queens is small, but it's warm and clean and safe. It's much better than that terrible place where you've been trying to sleep." Tears of overwhelming gratitude filled Sarah's eyes. "Maria, why are you doing this for me? You barely know me, and I have nothing to offer you in return." Maria's weathered face softened with deep emotion and hard-won wisdom. "Because 37 years ago, husband's family threw me out when they decided I wasn't good enough for their precious son. I was young, scared, pregnant with my daughter Alina, and not one person in this entire city offered to help me. But you, Mia, you remind me that kindness and compassion haven't disappeared from this world completely." These two women, separated by decades in age and different in background but united by shared struggle and unshakable determination, quickly became like mother and daughter, creating the family that both of them desperately needed. On a rainy Tuesday evening in late April, Sarah's contractions began with frightening intensity. With no health insurance and no money for a hospital delivery, Maria transformed into an experienced midwife. Boiling water on her small stove and gathering clean towels as Sarah gripped her hands and brought their son into the world in Maria's modest Queens apartment. "Dios mío, he's absolutely perfect," Maria whispered through tears of joy, carefully placing the crying healthy baby on Sarah's chest. "Look at those strong lungs. What will you call this beautiful angel?" "Michael," Sarah gasped through her own tears of exhaustion and overwhelming love, gazing down at her son's tiny, perfect features with wonder. "Michael David Mitchell. Because this boy is going to accomplish great things in this world, Maria. I can feel it in my heart. He's going to change everything." Life as a new mother tested every limit Sarah thought she possessed, and then pushed her far beyond them. She had to leave 6-week-old Michael with Maria while she returned to work with the fruit cart, her heart breaking a little more each morning as she kissed his tiny forehead goodbye. She would rush back every 3 hours to nurse him, her maternal instincts never allowing her to stay away for too long. When Michael was sturdy enough to travel safely, Sarah began strapping him to her back in a colorful woven carrier Maria had made for them. His cheerful gurgles and bright smiles became the soundtrack to her daily hustle. And regular customers began asking about the fruit lady's beautiful baby, who seemed to bring sunshine wherever they went. But when Michael reached 15 months old, their carefully constructed world nearly collapsed in the most terrifying way imaginable. He developed a dangerously high fever that refused to break despite everything they tried, followed by violent seizures that left both women paralyzed with fear and helplessness. At Mount Sinai Hospital's emergency room, after hours of agonizing tests and waiting, the pediatrician's diagnosis hit Sarah like a devastating physical blow. "Your son has bacterial meningitis. This is extremely serious. He needs immediate intensive care for antibiotics, constant neurological monitoring, quite possibly emergency surgery. We're looking at hospital costs of approximately $85,000. That's if there are no complications." Sarah had managed to save $38,000 over the past year, every dollar earned through months of back-breaking work in all kinds of weather, every penny carefully set aside for Michael's future education and opportunities. It wasn't even close to enough. She collapsed in the sterile hospital corridor, her entire body shaking with sobs as Maria held her trembling shoulders and whispered prayers in Spanish. "You take all my savings too?" Maria said with fierce determination, her voice strong despite her own tears. "Every dollar I have in this world. My precious boy is my grandson, and we're going to save him together, no matter what it costs." Between Sarah's savings and Maria's life savings, they had just barely enough to cover the treatment. Michael survived, but those terrifying days and sleepless nights in the pediatric intensive care unit changed Sarah forever. Sitting beside his tiny hospital bed, watching machines monitor every breath and heartbeat, she made another solemn vow. Never again would she be financially helpless when her child needed her. As Michael slowly recovered his strength and health, Sarah continued, working with the fruit cart while taking on every additional job she could find. She cleaned office buildings at night after Maria put Michael to bed, did laundry and ironing for busy professional women in her neighborhood, and carried groceries for elderly customers who appreciated her reliable service and genuine kindness. Every spare moment was dedicated to building towards something bigger, something that would provide real security for her son's future. She saved every possible penny, living on the bare minimum and reinvesting everything she could into expanding her small business. One sweltering summer afternoon, while selling fresh peaches and cold bottled water near a major construction site in downtown Brooklyn, Sarah overheard a group of workers loudly complaining about the terrible quality and high prices of food from the usual lunch trucks, heart-pounding with nervous excitement and desperate courage. Sarah approached the site foreman, a tough-looking, an Irish-American man named Patrick O'Sullivan, who had the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that commanded instant respect from his crew. "Excuse me, sir," Sarah said, trying to project confidence despite her racing heart. "What if I could provide your workers with hot, delicious home-cooked meals at reasonable prices? I'm talking about real food, the kind their mothers and wives make, not processed junk, quality ingredients, generous portions, and I guarantee every man on this site will be satisfied." Patrick looked skeptical, studying this young woman with a baby strapped to her back who was bold enough to approach him with a business proposition. But something in Sarah's steady gaze and determined tone made him pause and actually consider her offer. "Lady, you're talking about feeding 70 hungry construction workers every single day. Do you have any idea what kind of operation that requires? This isn't selling fruit on the sidewalk." "Give me just one chance to prove myself," Sarah said, meeting his gaze directly. "One day. If your crew doesn't absolutely love what I provide, you don't pay me a single penny. But if they do love it, then we talk about a regular contract." The next morning, Sarah arrived at the construction site with enormous pots of hearty beef stew, fresh-baked cornbread, still warm from the oven, crisp coleslaw, and homemade apple pie that filled the entire work area with the most incredible aroma anyone had smelled in months. The workers didn't just eat her food. They devoured every last bite with enthusiasm that bordered on reverence. Men who hadn't had a home-cooked meal in weeks were practically fighting over the last pieces of cornbread and begging to know when she'd be back. Word spread through Brooklyn's construction community like wildfire. Within just 2 months, Sarah had secured contracts with 8 different job sites throughout the borough. She hired 4 other women, all mothers who needed flexible work, and rented a small commercial kitchen space in a building that had seen better days but served their purposes perfectly. For the first time since Robert had thrown her out, could afford to rent a decent 2-bedroom apartment for herself and Michael. It wasn't luxury, but it was clean, safe, and most importantly, it was theirs. Young Michael, now a bright and curious toddler, watched his mother's incredible transformation with the kind of wide-eyed wonder that only children possess. Even at his young age, seemed to understand that something amazing was happening in their lives. By the time he started elementary school, Michael was helping his mother after classes, learning to count money, practicing his reading by taking customer orders, and absorbing lessons about hard work, determination, and treating every person with dignity and respect. He noticed how his mother always prepared extra food for homeless people who couldn't pay, how she never turned away anyone who was genuinely hungry, and how she treated her employees like family, rather than just workers. "Mama, why do you give free food to people who can't afford it?" he asked one evening as they walked home through their improving neighborhood, his small hand safely tucked in hers. "Because, my sweet boy, there was a time when we were hungry too, and someone showed us kindness when we desperately needed it," Sarah explained, her voice filled with the wisdom that comes from surviving real hardship. True success isn't about climbing higher by stepping on other people, It's about lifting others up as you rise. Michael never heard his mother speak with bitterness about his father, despite everything Robert had put them through. When her son asked about the man who had given him life but never been part of it, Sarah would simply say, "Your father made different choices than we would have made, Michael. But you're going to make better ones. You're going to be the kind of man who lifts people up instead of tearing them down." By middle school, Michael was consistently the brightest student in every class. By high school, his combination of academic excellence, natural leadership, and genuine compassion for others had earned him a full academic scholarship to Columbia University, the same school his father had attended. Though neither of them knew it at the time, Sarah's business continued to flourish beyond her wildest childhood dreams. Her reputation for providing clean, delicious, affordable food spread throughout New York City's working-class communities. She saved and reinvested every dollar she could, and by Michael's senior year of high school, she had purchased a beautiful brick building in Park Slope and opened Sarah's Kitchen, a restaurant that quickly became legendary throughout Brooklyn for its authentic comfort food, warm atmosphere, and the genuine care that went into every single dish. Maria, now in her mid-70s but still sharp as a tack and full of energy, watched their incredible success with tears of pure joy and maternal pride. Sarah had moved her into the beautiful apartment above the restaurant and made her a full partner in the business. But the older woman preferred spending her days in the dining room, telling stories to regular customers and spoiling Michael like the devoted grandmother he'd never had the chance to know. Meanwhile, across the city in Manhattan, Robert Sullivan's carefully constructed world was crumbling in the most spectacular and humiliating way imaginable. His marriage to Rebecca had initially seemed like everything he'd dreamed of, a lavish wedding featured in the society pages. Instant connections to powerful Wall Street families, invitations to exclusive country clubs, and a lifestyle that made all his colleagues green with envy. But Rebecca hadn't been the innocent, devoted secretary she'd pretended to be during their affair. She was calculating, ruthlessly ambitious, and sociopathically manipulative. When she caught the attention of Jonathan Blackstone III, a hedge fund billionaire who was 20 years older but worth over $3 billion, she immediately recognized a much bigger prize than a mere investment banker could ever provide: Rebecca's plan to rid herself of Robert was as brilliant as it was completely heartless. She secretly documented evidence of his extensive insider trading, illegal activities he'd engaged in to fund their expensive lifestyle and maintain the image of success she demanded. Then she anonymously reported him to the Securities and Exchange Commission, while simultaneously emptying their joint accounts and disappearing to a private island in the Caribbean with her new billionaire boyfriend. The FBI raid on Robert's office happened on a Monday morning in front of his entire staff, including junior employees he had routinely humiliated and dismissed over the years. The evidence against him was overwhelming and indisputable. He was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. In his cold, cramped cell at the Federal Correctional Institution in Otisville, New York, Robert had nothing but endless hours to think about every choice he'd made, every person he'd hurt, every opportunity for genuine happiness he'd thrown away in his ruthless pursuit of status and wealth. He thought constantly about Sarah's gentle hands as she used to massage his shoulders after long days at work, her encouraging words when he was struggling with difficult decisions, the way she used to wait up for him, no matter how late he came home, always with a warm meal and a listening ear. He thought about the child he had never met, the son he had coldly discarded in his heartless pursuit of a life that had ultimately proved to be nothing but an elaborate illusion. When Robert was finally released after serving his complete sentence, he was 62 years old but looked at least 75. 15 years of regret, shame, isolation, and the constant fear that comes with prison life had aged him terribly. With no money, no home, no friends, no family, and a federal conviction that made legitimate employment virtually impossible, he found himself living in a homeless shelter on the Lower East Side, panhandling for spare change from strangers who looked right through him as if he were invisible. One brutally hot Thursday afternoon in July, 26-year-old Michael was leaving his office at a prestigious investment consulting firm in the financial district. He now ran his own team and was being courted by several major Wall Street firms when he noticed an elderly homeless man sitting against a building wall near the subway entrance. Something about the man's utterly defeated posture and the hopeless expression in his eyes touched Michael's naturally compassionate heart. The beggar looked broken in a way that reminded him of his own family's struggles during his early childhood. The nights when he and his mother had worried about where their next meal would come from. "Sir," Michael called out, approaching the man with genuine concern and respect. "Are you hungry? When did you last eat? Can I help you get some food?" The homeless man looked up with eyes that had once blazed with ambition and arrogance, but now held nothing but shame, desperation, and the hollow emptiness that comes from having lost everything that ever mattered. "Please, son, anything you can spare? I haven't eaten anything real in 3 days. Come with me," Michael said gently, his heart aching for this broken human being who reminded him of all the homeless people his mother had helped over the years. "Let me buy you a proper meal, and maybe we can talk." Without recognizing the hunched, aged figure walking beside him as the father who had abandoned him before birth, Michael led the man to Sarah's Kitchen in Brooklyn, the restaurant that had become like a second home to everyone in the neighborhood. As they entered the bustling, warm restaurant filled with the incredible aromas of home-cooked food and the happy sounds of families enjoying meals together, Sarah looked up from behind the counter where she was greeting regular customers and froze completely. Time seemed to stop as she stared at the broken, unrecognizable man standing beside her successful, compassionate son. 26 years fell away in an instant, and she was once again the desperate, pregnant girl begging for mercy on a cold Manhattan street. "Robert," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the restaurant's cheerful atmosphere. Michael's head snapped toward his mother in confusion, then slowly back to the homeless man beside him. His eyes widened with shock recognition. In 26 years of carefully suppressed anger, pain, and questions that had never been answered, you're my father." Michael's voice cracked with the weight of a lifetime of abandonment and the sudden, overwhelming reality of coming face to face with the man who had shaped his entire life through his absence. Robert's voice broke completely as he realized who the kind, successful young man was. "Sarah, dear God, is this really my son?" "Don't you dare call me your son," Michael said, his voice shaking with decades of suppressed rage and hurt. "You threw us away like garbage. You left my mother pregnant and homeless on the streets. You chose money and status over your own family. I never want to see you again." Michael stormed out of the restaurant, leaving Robert collapsed in shame and Sarah staring after her son with tears streaming down her face, her heart breaking for both the man her son had become and the broken man her husband had allowed himself to become. Later that evening, after the restaurant had closed and the last customer had gone home, Sarah found Robert still sitting on the front steps, staring at the sidewalk with hollow, haunted eyes, the kind of comfort food that could heal almost anything, and sat beside him in the gathering darkness. "I'm sorry," Robert whispered, unable to look at her, his voice broken with genuine remorse. "I'm so deeply, profoundly sorry. Sarah, I threw away everything real and meaningful for things that turned out to mean absolutely nothing. I can see what you've built, what you've raised, the incredible man our son has become. I don't deserve your forgiveness, and I certainly don't deserve his." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, watching Brooklyn traffic stream past them as the city settled into evening. "I forgave you years ago, Robert," she finally said, her voice filled with hard-won peace. "Not for your sake, but for mine and Michael's. Holding on to anger and bitterness would have poisoned everything good and beautiful in our lives. Michael is hurt and angry, and he has every right to be. He's carried the weight of your abandonment his entire life, even though I tried my best to shield him from that pain. Give him time. Give him space. Maybe someday he'll find it in his heart to forgive you too, but that's his choice to make, not mine." That night, Sarah and Maria sat Michael down in the comfortable living room above the restaurant. "My son," Sarah said gently, reaching for his hands. "Anger is such a heavy, poisonous burden to carry through life. I know you're hurt, anyone would be, but holding on to that pain will only make you bitter and rob you of the joy you deserve. He doesn't deserve forgiveness, Mama. Look what he did to you, to us. How can you even consider forgiving him? And look what we built despite what he did, Maria added, her voice filled with the wisdom that comes from surviving real hardship. You are successful beyond our wildest dreams. Your mother has created something beautiful and meaningful. Our family. His mistakes and selfish choices don't have the power to hurt us anymore unless we choose to let them. It took Michael 8 days of wrestling with his emotions, talking with his mother and Maria, and searching his own heart before he went looking for Robert. He found him in the same spot where they'd first met, looking even more defeated and broken than before. I've made a decision, Michael said, without preamble, his voice steady but distant. I've decided to forgive you, not because you deserve it, and not because it changes anything about the past, but because I refuse to let your selfish choices continue to poison my life and my future. Robert looked up with desperate, pathetic hope flickering in his eyes. Does that mean we might be able to? It means I forgive you, Michael interrupted firmly. But I'm 26 years old. I've long passed the stage where I needed a father figure in my life. You can't undo 26 years of absence with an apology, no matter how sincere it might be. Michael pulled out a business card and handed it to Robert. This is a rehabilitation center that helps former inmates reintegrate into society and find purpose in their lives. If you truly want to change and make amends for what you've done, start there. Earn your redemption through your actions and choices, not just your words. 8 years later, Sarah's Kitchen had grown into a beloved chain of 7 restaurants throughout New York City, each one known for exceptional food, warm hospitality, and Sarah's commitment to hiring people who needed second chances. Michael, now a highly successful consultant with his own firm, sat at the large family table with his wife Amanda and their 4 young children. 3 daughters and a son they'd named David. After Sarah's father, who had died when she was young, Sarah, now recognized as one of Brooklyn's most successful businesswomen and active in numerous charities supporting single mothers, served plates piled high with Sunday dinner, roast chicken, with herb stuffing, mashed sweet potatoes, and the green bean casserole that had become legendary among their regular customers. Maria, now in her 80s, but still vibrant and sharp, told stories that made the grandchildren giggle and beg for more, her eyes twinkling with the joy that comes from seeing dreams come true, beyond anything she'd ever imagined possible. Robert was not at their family table, and he never would be. He had successfully completed the rehabilitation program. Michael had recommended and found steady work as a night security guard at a community center in Queens that served homeless families. He lived quietly and humbly in a small studio apartment, sending occasional letters to Michael that were polite but appropriately distant. The father-son relationship they would never have was a wound that had healed over, but left a permanent scar on both their hearts. But as Sarah looked around her table at the family she had built through love, determination, forgiveness, and unwavering faith in the possibility of better days, she knew that some stories don't end with perfect reconciliation and Hollywood-style happy endings. Sometimes, the real victory is simply the love that survives every betrayal, the dreams that come true despite seemingly impossible obstacles, and the knowledge that you've raised children who understand that true strength comes not from abandoning others in pursuit of personal success, but from lifting them up as you climb toward your own dreams. Mama, Michael said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand, his eyes bright with love and gratitude. Thank you for showing me that a person's worth isn't measured by where they come from or what mistakes they've made, but by how they choose to love, serve, and lift up others. Sarah smiled, her heart overflowing with the kind of wealth that can never be stolen, lost, or taken away by anyone or anything in this world. Outside, New York City buzzed with its eternal energy, endless possibilities and millions of stories unfolding every single day. But inside Sarah's kitchen, surrounded by the family she had chosen and the family who had chosen her in return, she knew without any doubt that she had everything that truly mattered in this beautiful,
complicated life.
The strength of a mother's heart she had learned through fire, struggle, and ultimate triumph, could overcome any betrayal, survive any hardship, and build any dream from nothing but determination, love, hope, and an absolutely unshakable faith in tomorrow. And that was the greatest gift she could give her children, not just the ability to forgive those who had wronged them, but the power to love without limits, to dream without fear, and to build something beautiful and meaningful from nothing but courage and an unbreakable will to succeed. Been counted out because you had nothing? Betrayed by family? Drop your story below. Hit like if this gave you strength, subscribe for more, and check out these next 2 videos.